In this video, we're going to go over the reasons why you might use a presentational aid and some rules for using presentational aids in your speech. The first reason you might use presentational aids is to establish ethos. Ethos means the audience's perceived credibility of the speaker. That means, what does the audience think of your credentials? Do they think that you're a qualified candidate or a qualified person to talk about what you are talking about? And in a study, according to your book, there are 3 reasons why you might use presentational aids. The first is that it makes you look more professional, i.e. it doesn't look like some haphazardly thrown together cut and paste job that you might do for a book report when you're in 2nd grade, but instead you've actually went out of your way to use technology and make it look as clean and crisp and organized as possible. The second reason it establishes ethos is because it makes you look more prepared. It makes it look like you spent a bunch of time and you're well versed in what you are talking about because of that. And then the third reason it establishes ethos is because it heightens audience engagement. The more you can keep the audience engaged, the more they're listening to you. The more they listen to you, the more they find out how smart you are about the topic that you are speaking about. So the more you can keep them engaged, the higher chances of them learning something from you and thinking you're smart because of it. The second reason you might use a presentational aid is to provide emphasis. Provide emphasis. You want to use graphics because it makes it look important. I've done a little study before, or a little experiment, I should say, in classes, where I've written the words poopy diapers up on the board. And 9 times out of 10, classes would write down the words poopy diapers. If you think about it, most people think if there is something projected or something written on the board, it's important or something of emphasis. So think of it that way. If you have statistics, you can put them in graph form. If you put them in graph form, show us the graph. That would provide emphasis and allow for the audience to know that that information is important and something they should remember well. For example, if I were giving a speech about how there needs to be strict hurricane-resistant building codes inside of the Gulf of Mexico, I could show you this map. This map shows a bunch of hurricanes hitting the Gulf of Mexico right in here. It wouldn't make sense for you to try to say that Wisconsin, Kansas, Montana should have hurricane-resistant houses because hurricanes just don't hit there. But this graph, or this image, allows the audience to really see that hurricanes do quite frequently visit the Gulf states in the United States. That way it provides emphasis on just how important this issue would be. Now that we've looked at why it not only establishes ethos and provides emphasis, the third reason why you might use a presentational aid is to provide support, or use it as evidence. Now, there are a lot of different claims that you can make out there in the world, but you want to make sure that you have evidence for those claims. And sometimes presentational aids help you make those claims. For example, if I told you that the Denver airport is indeed the scariest place on earth, most of you aren't going to think that I'm telling the truth here. But hopefully with some little bit of visual evidence, I can be able to persuade you a little bit. The first thing to realize is this is the runway layout of the Denver airport. Now, I'm going to hope that most of you remember history class, and most of you remember a certain political party that took rise in the 1930s in Germany. This seems to look like that political symbol. So that's creepy, but not the worst thing. But if you start looking at some of the murals that exist in the Denver airport, then things become a little bit more frightening. So if we look at this picture, for example, you see that that blue arrow is pointing to a dead soldier. And that soldier is dead. They're looking to, in the picture, it looks like they're taking a sword and turning it into a plow. Now, the old adage goes that when you did that, it was a sign of peace, and that things were prospering, and because a long time ago, most soldiers were farmers, and so it symbolized that peace was among us. And you can see that there are people from all different races, etc. You can even see two little doves in this picture. And, you see everyone celebrating and peace is upon us. But here's the interesting thing. We in the West read left to right. But if you look at this mural, it is the left part of a giant mural, a more segmented and broken up mural. And here's actually the other part of that mural. You can see from the picture that this mural completes the rainbow that you see in the background over here, and actually comes forth here, and the soldier raises from the dead, kills the dove with his sword, which represents peace being ended, and then you see the repeated image of a mother holding her dead child over and over and over and over again. You see children lying in rubble, trying to sleep in a worn, torn, and devastated place. Other interesting things to note about our friend the Skeletor can be pointed out on this webpage from this anomaliesunlimited.com. But you see this little picture right here is actually a picture of our friend Skeletor, the risen soldier. But that eagle, if you look real close, so if you go to the website yourself and look at his hat, the hat is the same eagle that was used in Nazi Germany. Coincidence? Maybe it's not really referencing Nazi Germany. Maybe it's just eagles. Well, I would like to point out one last thing here, and that's this letter. If you go to the website and actually read the script, or what the letter says, it's part of the mural. And that letter inside of the mural actually makes reference to someone who is in Auschwitz concentration camp. In fact, it's from Hannah Heckenberg, who was 14 years old and died December 18th, 1943 in Auschwitz. And she is writing a poem about how she hopes to not have to experience war anymore. So we've noticed that through multiple different symbols, not only the runway layout, but the way the murals operate, and the references to Nazism, that the Denver airport's making an argument that Nazism and a new world order might be prospering here shortly again. There's some other things you can read on that website, anomaliesunlimited.com. Things that include, like, well, they attempted to make the airport once in Denver, but when they realized that they screwed up the Denver airport, instead of tearing it down and starting over, they actually brought in a bunch of dirt and buried the original airport and then built the current day airport on top of it. There are weird things talking about how the barbed wire to random hallways is actually facing the wrong way, as if to try to keep people inside of those hallways, not try to keep the airline users from going down those hallways. Interesting to note. There is also a big contribution that is attributed to the Queen of England for constructing the Denver airport, and the fact that Denver is indeed one of the places that's supposed to be able to uphold during an apocalyptic event because of its fresh water, the fact that it's a plateau and therefore can grow crops, and is very easily defendable. It seems like there might be something going on there that we don't exactly know about. So is it the scariest place on Earth? Hard to say. But if you start looking at the evidence yourself, you'll see that the visual evidence is actually fairly persuasive and starts making you doubt whether that's the case or not. The fourth reason you might use a presentational aid is clarity. If you use graphs, it can make things seem more clear. It makes it more vivid to the audience and what they're looking at. For example, this chart right here, this pie graph, indicates that the majority of HIV transmissions, i.e. 2/3 of them, occur from male to female, and that only 1/3 of HIV infections occur from female to male. So you could use that graph in order to point out the importance for women to make sure that they are empowered to make decisions over their own body. Looking at, the simple graph and allowing it to be more clear about how most of those transmissions occur. Now that we've looked at how you can make things more clear using presentational aids, let's look at the last one, which is emotional response. You can establish ethos or establish pathos in a speech by showing images. This is an incredibly powerful image that was taken by Kevin Carter in the early 90s. It shows a vulture, a symbol of death and destruction, getting ready to eat that small child. I would use this picture to start explaining about how climate conflicts are already occurring, about how drought ravaged Sudan because the climate changed, and how people are still killing each other there because the weather patterns have changed. And so I would use this to make a plea, to make an appeal, and hope that people could maybe move to hybrids or electric cars and try to move away from gas-guzzling vehicles. Controlling that pathos can help you persuade people. So now that we've looked at the reasons why you might use presentational aids, there's a couple rules. First, you want to keep from using words because people can get distracted even by things like font. And so if you use words, they need to be very, very few and not long paragraphs of words, because otherwise people will read it and not listen to you. The second thing that you should think about is make sure that the presentational aids are big enough inside of your PowerPoint or Prezi, and make sure that people can see what's going on, see the images from across the room. The other thing has to do with news clips. Make sure that you can pass the mute test. And the mute test is a news clip is only useful if it could be muted and you could discuss the clip yourself and show what is going on and use it as a piece of evidence. If it can't pass the mute test, you probably want to reconsider and not use that one, that news clip as a presentational aid in your speech. Don't pass things around. Try to make sure that everything can be put up onto a PowerPoint or a Prezi. That way people aren't distracted by passing things around. And the last rule for using presentational aids is make sure that there are blank slides in between slides that are not immediately being used. So if there's a slide and then you're going to pause before you go to the next slide, put a blank slide in between those two slides so that the people aren't staring up at your presentational aid and distracting themselves, but instead there's a blank slide which creates more incentive for the audience to pay more attention to you as you are speaking instead of your slides themselves. If you have any questions or anything specific you want to know from this, feel free to email me.